spoiler alert. Alone, season 12, episode 3. You know, the first 45 minutes of the show were really boring, but there was excitement at the end. They had to someone pushed the emergency button. I guess they've got an emergency button too, on their phones, so if they don't feel up to talking, they can just press this button. They press it. The team shows up. Now, this guy has been eating acacia beans, a lot of them, I guess, and he caught a trout. This is day 5. Not a trout, a catfish. I don't think there'd be trout in that water. Catfish, and he's eating some prickly pear cactus pads. He heard they taste like horrible. They taste horrible. He didn't want to eat them. Now he has to eat them because they have to have food. Well, during the night, he starts throwing up, he has diarrhea, everything, and there's blood in it. So, of course, he hits the button, they go in, and there's a after show, at least on cable, on the history, should I say the history app? I don't know if you can get it, or the Roku, history app on the Roku anyway. You can see this shorter segment called The Ride Home. And that gives them, they include a little more about what happened to them immediately after the show, them getting to base camp. And so I get this guy to base camp, and he's going out in an ambulance. There were no helicopters involved here. I thought that was different. Of course, at night, you're not going to fly around in them if you can absolutely, help it. But, so he has blood. Now, they say at one point, and at the show, I assume this is just like, they've got him to the new location, so this is day 6. So they don't exactly know what's going on with him, but they surmise at that point anyway, he had eaten something that was not good to eat. In other words, some poisonous type of substance got in him, and this caused all these problems and this bleeding. I thought it perhaps was that he didn't get all the prickly pears have big spines, prickly pear cactus pads, right? He's going to start eating them. He doesn't want them because he heard they taste like crap. So they've got the big spines, and they have these minute hair spines that are really, there's a lot of them in small disease. What they suggest is you burn them off. And so he kind of does that, but it could be that he didn't long enough, and then you get all those things in your system, and they can cut it up. That could account for him, vomiting and having blood, or, going to the bathroom and having blood. But they don't say that, so maybe I'm completely wrong. Maybe they'll have some more information later, I don't know. But, I don't know, the importance of water and staying hydrated really comes out in the show. I think the people who brought a pot and a water jug, a water bottle, really were the smart ones. Because you figure you've got to, you're losing this huge amount of liquid from sweating because it's so hot. And, if you're doing something or walking up a hill, building a shelter, whatever, you're using more. So, you need to have that back in you. So it's almost like, you'd when you boil water, you'd boil it, and then you got a fire going, you'd want to boil more. Now, the woman that I think is kind of clever, and she got a warthog right off in this first 5 days. She builds a water cache. So what's that? It's basically some rocks. She's cut a piece of her waterproof tarp to put the water in. So she's got kind of a, you could say a makeshift bucket of water. And she put some rocks on the top. Now, it looks like to me that it could blow over in bad weather. The wind would catch the edges of that and take it off. Or, I don't know, maybe an animal would get into it. But I don't know. But it's a really good idea. I think she's really got something. Now, maybe she should have thought of maybe uh, digging a hole in, could even be in our shelter, and putting that liner in, then putting the water in. But the idea here is you boil water. What do you do with the water? You're going to drink a bunch of it. You're going to drink the 2 quarts. They can have up to a 2-quart pan. You're going to drink that whole 2 quarts right then? Well, with this idea, she can dump that all into her water cache, or, some into a water bottle. I forget whether she had the water bottle, but you know what I mean. You could go on and do the next batch. But the trouble with dehydration is you don't know you're dehydrated. Now, what some of the signs of dehydration is if your urine becomes really, really yellow and concentrated, that's a good indication that you haven't drank enough water. You don't have enough fluids to flush through you. And that's really important. And of course, on sweating, you're losing, not only are you using water, but you're losing electrolytes, sodium, magnesium, different things. So it's good to kind of replace that. And I did some quick research on, would eating prickly pear cactus put back electrolytes into your system? And the answer is yes and no. It's got a bunch of good ones, but it has virtually no sodium. And that's the main electrolyte you lose when you sweat. There are other ones. And believe it or not, that prickly pear cactus would probably take care of that if you ate enough of them. And then I checked, there is some sodium in scorpions. Now, scorpions, they, on all the survival shows, sooner or later, someone will do it. They'll cut the tail off. You put something, hold the thing down with a stick, cut the tail off, and some people eat it right raw. But of course, it can grab on the way down. So I wouldn't suggest that. Plus, I don't know, it's never good to eat things like that aren't cooked. But you could gather up some scorpions, and I thought that was true, but they didn't say it. All of the participants have a UV light, flashlight, because one guy showed the difference. You couldn't see anything with his headlamp, and he hit it with the ultraviolet light, and the thing, they turn really white, bluish white, so they really stand out. So conceivably, you could go around hunting some scorpions at night, or just, when you see one, grab it or something. You'd have to cut off the tail, have some kind of container to put it in. But you could take those back. You could cook them. You could overcook them if you want to, get to the point where you kind of char them a little, because at that point, you're still going to get the sodium out of them. But I'm going to look more into some of the other things they have. What kind of sources are there for electrolytes? Now, of course, an animal's going to be good because they have electrolytes in them. So snakes, the mammals and everything. There's birds around too. Birds and eggs, I think, would be good. And but it's just this unrelenting heat. Now, they're talking about it becoming winter there. So winter there means hot in the daytime and really cold in the night. So they're going to have a situation where the swing in temperature is going to be dramatic. And they're noticing some storm clouds coming. And, the problem with the desert, of course, is it will rain, and there's no vegetation and things, really, not enough to hold water in one spot. And basically you have a flash flood. This water, it doesn't soak in, and it just goes whoosh. It, goes by you. And, people have been killed in flash floods. And so here they're noticing the rain coming. And one of the people says, well, I got to do something about having a rainproof shelter. And they throw up something, but it didn't look too secure to me. But, I guess when you're in something, hot and dry, you're not thinking flash floods, but that is something they should mention. One of the contestants even built her little shelter to protect her from the rain, and it was in a dry, looked like a riverbed. So that's, it's definitely an area where flash flood's going to hit you if it comes. But I did look into the idea of keeping your clothes wet. In other words, if you've got a lot of people prefer cotton for survival in more tropical areas. And you could keep your shirt wet. You could put something around your head too. I think they can bring a bandana, smock, or whatever. Keep that wet, put it on your head. And the idea would be to, instead of your body producing all that sweat to keep it cool, this stuff on you would, that's wet, would carry away the heat, and you'd sweat less. And the whole purpose between sweating less is to lose less electrolytes. And so, they're in day 5 of all of them probably not drinking enough water and becoming low in electrolytes. And the thing about dehydration is it affects your mental abilities. So your ability to make critical decisions, which of course you're in a survival situation, you've got to make critical decisions. You're just not making them because the brain isn't, as they say, running on all cylinders because it doesn't have the sufficient amount of water that your body needs to keep everything going properly. So in that situation, you can make bad decisions. They did mention too, and I'll do some research on this, acacia seeds. The guy's eating those. That's what this one guy that went out was eating. The meal he had before he went out the night before was acacia. He calls them beans, but they're seeds, acacia seeds, and this prickly pear cactus pad. And then he gets really violently ill in the middle of the night. But evidently, eating large amounts of acacia beans can affect the ability of the body to, digest and use proteins. So you put a bunch of the stuff in you, it's like, not eating much of anything because of any protein there is just going to go through you. So, I don't know. This again, for first aid kits signals something I've always thought, and you don't see them in some survival kits, but every survival kit should have anti-diarrheal medicine. And most people agree the iodium, you can get that in a generic brand, is the best thing to have, as opposed to something that's prescription. If you actually had a history of stuff like this, maybe you could get a prescription too. But normal iodium type generic or brand name, and usually they sell them on little cards. You get them in a box or something, but they're in on little cards. So that makes them really handy to stick, in one of your pockets or somewhere, your survival kit, whatever, go bag, so that if you do get into a situation, and you can get into that situation in any environment, because drinking water it's very easy to recontaminate that water. And you get these certain organisms in you, and you can't really afford to have diarrhea for 3 days when you're in an area where you're sweating out everything. Then you've got a huge loss of electrolytes. I think it's Kelsey, the woman. She opted to bring salt, I believe, and that's a really good thing because, again, I was looking at that, and you could, and this might not be a full requirement, but it'd be better than nothing. But you could take about a half a teaspoon of that salt and eat, and consume that during the course of the day. You could spread it out or whatever, and that's going to replace that sodium that you're sweating out. Now, it would have to be more if you're sweating a lot and different things like that. But I think, having that salt is really a wise decision because of the loss of electrolytes. So tell me what you think. We'll see what happens. See, I guess I didn't think by day 5, what have we got? 3 or 4 people have gone out. That's a lot. And, one guy went out because of his attitude. And that could have been brought on by lack of hydration. Another guy went out, and so they're going out for reasons that they might not have done if they were well hydrated. So there you go. Bye.